Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of my new series in which I will be bringing you along on my journey of writing my very first novel. Unless you count the knockoffs of Magic Tree House I wrote when I was in 5th grade, then this is not my first novel. So I've been seeing a lot of very creative YouTube videos coming on my feed lately about people designing games and doing 3D modeling and making their own cartoons. And I thought, I really want to document the progress of my book. And I have actually already finished the first draft of my book. So let me just give you a little bit of the background about it. I actually started it in 2022, literally like January 2022, as my final project for university. I wrote it and I illustrated it as my final thesis project because I studied English and art and anthropology, and it was kind of a way of mixing all those things together in my final project. So I made the first 5 chapters for that project. After I submitted it and I graduated, I sort of got stuck. I didn't really know how to move forward with that story, but it was really meaningful to me, so I didn't want to let it go. So I put the project down, knowing that I would come back to it one day. And in that time between 2022, I graduated university, I worked 3 jobs so that I could move to Japan, and I live in Japan now. When I first came to Japan last year in 2023, August 2023, the first few months I was mostly just traveling around and getting used to living here. I was really busy moving and all that, so I just really didn't have a lot of time to work on anything creative. After settling in and reading a couple books, I really got inspired to go back to my story. I restarted it completely. The main character's name changed, the plot changed. Pretty much the only thing that stayed the same were the major character arcs and the character beats. So I restarted everything in either late June or early July. I can't really pinpoint the exact date, but I finished the whole thing on September 9th. Is when I finished, and my first draft came out to 100,360 words. That's a lot of words to write in just around 3 months, probably like 3 months at the most. I basically didn't do anything. I came home from work, I shut myself in, and I would write for hours and hours every night. I probably wrote at least 2,500 words a day. Sometimes I wrote more, sometimes I wrote less, but that's specifically in my manuscript only. The manuscript itself, I write in Scrivener. I would write a lot at work. In Japan, I teach English to elementary school students, so between classes or if I have time, I would write in my notebooks. So I have these 4 notebooks. I'm a writer, not a mathematician, and I'm currently on my 5th one. This is how much I have left, so I'm gonna need to get another one pretty soon. So I would write in these notebooks while I had time at work, and then I would come home and I would type it all into the Scrivener or Microsoft Word. If I just want to develop some characters and write a few scenes for them, I would write that all in Microsoft Word. I probably have, I would say maybe like 400,000 words put into this whole thing, but the manuscript itself is about 100,360 words. I told myself I would give myself a month from September 10th. I finished September 9th, but I said on September 10th, I will start the editing process on October 10th. And it is currently November 23rd, and I have not started writing the second draft. I have not started editing, and we're gonna talk about that. So for my break, I wanted to work on some of my other hobbies. I wanted to do some research and more world building, because after you have that first draft down, you kind of have a more focused idea of what else needs to be researched and what else needs to be put into the world to make it feel whole. But the longer I stayed on this break, the more pressure that I started to feel over starting draft 2. With your first draft, it's allowed to be bad. Your first draft is just you getting all your ideas out. It's basically just a thought dump. My first draft is a lot of like major scenes and some in between scenes. So it was a lot of scenes without the interweaving that makes it connect, In draft 2, there's more pressure to start filling in those gaps and making it make sense as a story. I'm rethinking characters, I'm cutting out characters, which is really sad for me to do. I'm changing the magic system, I'm changing the villain's motivation, I'm changing the character's motivation, because I felt like in draft 1, my main character's motivation wasn't strong enough. A lot of the things that I've been writing about in my break are going to very massively change the first draft, and I think that's okay. The first draft is really far away from what it becomes. You can't compare your first draft to a published book, because their published book did not start there, and if it did, they're a genius, and I'm jealous of them. So with that, and with all of the world building I've been doing and all of the changing I've been doing, I almost find myself unable to make a decision on what changes I need to make and if it's better this way or if it's better the first way. Let's say I originally had a character going to the market. Maybe I'm like, oh, maybe it's better if the market is in a cave. Or maybe it's better if it's not a market at all and it's a slumber party. Maybe the slumber party isn't in a cave, maybe it's in a tree, maybe it's in a cozy cottage in a tree. Literally anything can happen. Anything can happen. I'm finding myself struggling with decision making. I really just need to sit down and decide. I also have been doing a lot of reading in my break. I feel like what you read really influences what you write. Some of my favorite books that I've read are The Bear and the Nightingale. I really enjoy and I'm really inspired by how the author integrates Russian mythology and folklore into the story. And The Bear and the Nightingale is so well written. I really want to get to that level of my writing. But when you're working on your first draft, good writing, it's not on the top of the list. I'm also reading Fantasties by George MacDonald, and I'm very much inspired by George MacDonald's work. So I'm on a pile of books right now, and The Princess and the Goblin by George MacDonald is one of them in the pile. I think it's important when you're writing a book to read different genres. All the ones that I just mentioned were fantasy, and I can't help it. I love fantasy so much. The other things that I've been reading are Irish myths. I have 3 main inspirations with my book, and one of them is Irish mythology. I am of Irish descent. I'm second generation American. My grandparents came from Ireland. It's a big part of my childhood and growing up. You know, I did Irish dance when I was a kid. I played the fiddle for my grandpa. My grandma read me stories, recipes, just everything. Being Irish American, I always felt disconnected from Ireland. Writing this book and integrating Irish mythology and Irish history is my way of connecting to my ancestral homeland and connecting to my family. A lot of the characters in my book are based off of my family members. And you know, a lot of fantasy these days take inspiration from Irish mythology, but they really kind of appropriate it. My goal is to integrate Irish mythology in a way that's honest to the source. It is kind of difficult between staying true to the mythology and the history versus where can I make things up on my own for my own story, and also making it accessible. A lot of people can't get into Irish mythology because Irish is a different language. The names are confusing to people who don't speak Irish. I didn't understand it at first. I had to do a lot of research on the pronunciations, and then also knowing that Irish mythology was recorded by Catholic monks. It's written through a Catholic lens. The continuity in Irish mythology is a lot harder to follow than it would be in, say, Greek mythology, where everything is super, super well recorded and documented. So thank you, England, for that. Something that really inspires me about Irish mythology is that there's a lot of women warriors. There's a lot of warrior goddesses and female fighters who are really strong. But as I was reading more and more of these tales, I started to realize that in many of the stories, the women are only powerful so that the male hero of the story could come and defeat them and dominate them. I didn't like that. All the female heroines and warriors are basically only created to show the strength of the male heroes. I wanted to create a story of an Irish woman who is strong in her own right. One of the other 3 inspirations for this book is my love for Peter Pan. This notebook is actually a Peter Pan notebook. The story of Peter Pan has been one of my favorites ever since I was a young girl. I have the original by J.M. Barrie, I have all the Peter and the Starcatchers, I have basically every iteration of Peter Pan movie that has ever existed. When I was a kid, I always wondered, why would Wendy go back to her home? Why didn't she stay in Neverland? I would watch movies like Peter Pan, like Alice in Wonderland, where the character would go and experience these great magical things in this great magical land and then return back to her boring old home. Little McCaffrey was always like, I would never do that. I said, sorry mom, but if Peter Pan ever came to me, I'm staying in Neverland. I sort of understand that from a different perspective now. I wanted to write a story where a character starts in the human world and then goes into this fairyland and decides she's going to stay there. What happens to the character that decides to stay? What happens when they choose not to go home? The last thing that inspired this book is illness, and that is because I am chronically ill. I wanted to create a character that is also ill like me and still goes on adventures like me. Because of my illness, I tend to be drawn towards escapism. Got really into media and fantasy shows and books and series and lean into my own stories and escape into make-believe worlds. I wanted to give that to my character. She could actually escape and she can actually go to this fairyland. We'll see how it all turns out, but those are the 3 main inspirations for the book. I think that's enough chit-chatting for today. I hope you like this sort of sit-down video because I'm really not used to it yet. My neighbors I can hear them, so they can definitely hear me, so I'm a little embarrassed. I'm still gonna be making videos about whatever I'm watching. Let me know if there's anything else you want to see, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!